Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this episode. This is the fourth episode of Energy Talks. This episode is sponsored by iSafety. Today, we'd like to welcome Mr. Marcel Kooter, the founder of Holland Energy Hub and veteran of BP and Mobil. We will explore more about Marcel's journey from the oil and gas to green hydrogen and dive into the challenges that he's been through and especially in the projects. And we'll discuss more about the strategic partnerships that he's doing. And we'll finish up with the exciting look or focus on the fuel cells or hydrogen energy. First, I'd like to thank you for joining us to this episode.
Thanks for having me.
We would like to know the start of your career path. How did you start in the oil and gas, and what was the development later?
Yeah, okay. Well, I started with studying mechanical engineering initially in Delft University. Actually, happy with that in a way because the university is now getting quite well established in the area of renewables and supporting energy transition with a lot of different topics. But my time there is a long time ago. Meanwhile, my own son has already graduated in a master in sustainable energy technology in the same university. So it kind of shows how old I am, I suppose. I finished studying there in 1985. Mechanical engineering. I mean, at that time, Delft was known for delivering petroleum engineers. So it was probably the biggest fit into Shell at the time, although I did up with another oil company. I started mechanical engineering, but then soon went into did my master's in business administration and started looking at organizational problems. Sort of from and the technical study helped to approach organizations in a more, let's say, analytical way, looking in a black book approach. What is the input and what is the output and how do you control that, and only when needed you drill down into the problem and go into the black box to a level lower. And that way of thinking is still something that I think I still apply nowadays in my everyday work. So after I finished the university, I did my degree at the KLM freight department actually, where I looked at productivity problems, and moved to a chemicals company. Was at the time the largest chemical company in the Netherlands, DSM. Stayed in sort of logistics, but I then I wanted to be more in sales and more commercial, and then I made the step to work for Mobil Oil. Initially in the Netherlands as a sales engineer, so there was still a technical element to it, looking after lubrication and selling lubricants. At that time, funny enough, we were already promoting synthetic lubricants, which were built from gas, and that is very. We talk about late 80s, and now we still use synthetic products now as part of the energy transition. So it's come sort of full circle. Mm-hmm. I worked in retail in Mobil. I worked in marketing in different roles, many sort of sales, marketing and sales roles. Moved to London, worked in Mobil Europe, moved to Brussels, to Hamburg, and then back to the Netherlands for a spell. And then I made a step to BP, became head of lubricants for BP in the Benelux. Moved over to England again in early 2000 to work as a global brand manager for Kestrel, who were acquired by BP at the time. And then I did a lot of different jobs in BP, in chemicals and plastics, and then strategic accounts was an important role, which is still also relevant today, where I worked on developing global partnerships. One of the partnerships I was heavily involved in was a global strategic cooperation we had with Ford Motor Company. And interesting enough, already those days we are working on the renewables and getting them introduced. Now I'm talking about the early 2000s. And ended up working for supply and trading in BP and got involved in global gas marketing, LNG and gas. and oil, crude, all sort of oil products that were being traded around the world, and developing partnerships and relationships. And yeah, after I left BP, I worked as a consultant for a while until I moved to the UAE and got back into to energy, focusing on energy consulting, and slowly moved to be more involved in energy transition and supporting initially energy companies looking at decarbonizing and managing their carbon footprint and looking at their emissions and how that could be addressed basically.
I guess the key word here is global partnership. This is the main skill that you gained from the global experience that you're having. Also managed, including also consulting with it, which move us to the next question about the hydrogen and about the scaling of hydrogen. So you have coordinated a consortium of 50 plus companies, of Dutch companies, and bringing together clean hydrogen bringing it all together in the Gulf region. What have been the biggest challenges that you are facing, and what lessons you have learned in such cross-border initiatives?
Well, to take a step back, I got involved in hydrogen, and there is of course, a lot of familiarity from the oil and gas industry that comes across to hydrogen, because in the end we're dealing with molecules, and that's what we used to do in Mobil Oil and BP, and in the way hydrogen molecules are not that different from gas molecules, and so a lot of the learnings from there I can take across, and so that transition from let's say oil and gas to renewables was in that sense not too big. And also, like I said earlier, BP, when we were working with Ford in the early 2000s, we were already introducing solar energy to work with, and putting solar panels on Ford plants to become more sustainable. I was already driving around in a hydrogen car in early 2006 or 7, I think, when we introduced a hydrogen vehicle at Ford Motor Company, and we're supporting that as BP. So unfortunately, BP has pulled back a little bit from those early investments, but that was already, it shows how long it has taken to get where we are now, and that is not like an easy path. When I got focused on hydrogen in the Gulf region, then I was approached by Roland Collen, who was at that time the head of regional business development, working for the Netherlands Foreign Affairs Department, and linked to the embassies in this region. And he asked me to look at hydrogen because he was kind of started to focus on that from the embassy, and they have a program in the Netherlands which is called Partners for International Business, which is a government-supported program whereby they try to help a certain sector to get connected with opportunities in a certain region. And in this case, it was hydrogen. And the region was the Gulf region, basically, because a lot of there is happening, and a lot of activities around energy transition. The Netherlands, they signed MOUs to cooperate around energy transition and around hydrogen specifically, from the point of view that they realized that a lot of the hydrogen in the Netherlands need to come from abroad because the country is too small to produce all the hydrogen at scale that they need, let's say, in 10, 20 years' time. And so they signed these MOUs to cooperate with the UAE, with Oman, and with Saudi Arabia. And that for us creates a platform to build this public-private partnership, what it is. So we created the Holland Hydrogen Hub, basically to represent the private sector from the Netherlands, companies who are involved in the hydrogen value chain, to bring them in contact with all the opportunities that develop in this region. And we started with about just over 20 companies, that's only less than 2 years ago when we started. And meanwhile, we have about 50 partners. That's a challenge in itself to manage so many companies, but they represent the whole value chain. So of course, when you develop hydrogen, it can be the different colors. It can be blue, it can be green, it can be coming from fossil fuels with carbon capture, it can come from renewable energy, of course, with water electrolyzers, and that starts already at that end, and then you have everything in between. So how you then produce the hydrogen, how you convert it into different carriers, ammonia, LOHC, methanol, all the different carriers that you can think of, and then storing it and transporting it and importing it into Europe through the ports in the Netherlands, like Port of Amsterdam, Port of Rotterdam, and then looking further downstream how it's going to be used and everything that's involved in the infrastructure and all those. And then there's a lot of supporting companies like engineering companies that we have, and consultancy companies and other companies that provide support and around creating the whole value chain. And we brought them all together and created more or less, let's say, all these companies. They can represent the whole hydrogen ecosystem, and to bring them then in contact with the opportunities, then we can bring the right company at the right moment forward. And that was the idea of the Holland Hydrogen Hub, so that we look at the opportunities, and they're all in different stages of development, and then we can get the right company connected to the right opportunity and support the development here in this region. And hopefully then in the end, of course, help the whole energy transition a bit forward.
Mentioning about presenting all these startup companies, yesterday while I was on LinkedIn, I saw your picture with His Majesty and the King. You're presenting different companies. Can you tell us more about that experience, or on which company really stood out between all these companies?
We have been working in Oman for a while now, and got involved with Hydrom as the orchestrator of the green hydrogen economy in Oman. And that was, I think, when we kicked off our program back in December 2023. That was the first time that I got involved here with the first Green Hydrogen Summit Oman in 2023. And we had a reception then organized by the Netherlands Embassy, and we had your Minister Al Ruzaiqi doing a speech, and it was fantastic how passionate he spoke about hydrogen and what was all needed, and that's basically, that helps us to create the right environment, let's say, to bring all those projects forward. And we've been working closely. We have looking at, initially we were only bringing companies in contact with the opportunities. That was the role that we had as Holland Hydrogen Hub. But when talking to Hydrom at the beginning, end of last year, beginning of this year, we sort of discussed the challenges that they were facing. How do we make hydrogen even more competitive, also in this region? How do we get it transported? What is the right carrier? And all those questions, and how do we manage that? And then I said, well, we have, all the companies tend to work in isolation and develop their own piece of the puzzle. But at some point you need to look at how do you combine them, and how do you get synergy value, and how do you establish that the sum of the whole is greater than its parts, basically. And that's what we try to do with this project. We bring at the moment around 8 companies together from Holland Hydrogen Hub, who all deliver a piece of hydrogen production and infrastructure. And by combining it, we believe it can create a more efficient way of producing hydrogen and transporting it. In this case, the project that we are developing, that I presented to the Sultan and to our King, was about that. We brought those companies together, and hydrogen, made from electrolyzers. There are different types of electrolyzers, alkaline, PEM, but the new one coming up is solid oxide. And solid oxide operates at high temperature, but you can make the whole process more efficient if the heat that you need is not coming from electricity, but from other sources. And in this case, we produce LOHC with one of our partners called Voyex. They are a startup in the Netherlands who produce LOHC, which is an alternative hydrogen carrier, for those who don't know, where the hydrogen is bound into a liquid, which is safe to transport, safe to store, But when you do that, when you take the hydrogen into the liquid, that is an exotherm process, so it creates heat. That heat you can use to create a temperature for the electrolyzer, which runs at around 1000 Celsius. And the electrolyzer is made by another partner, Bozal, in combination with a stack manufacturer called Solidera. And by using the heat, the waste heat as it were, then you use 30% less electricity to produce the same amount of hydrogen. Well, if you use 30% less electricity, the process is more efficient, so your cost of hydrogen is lower, and you need to invest less in renewable infrastructure, let's say, to produce the same amount of hydrogen. So it's kind of a win-win. And by combining all those different, we also then use the heat as well for desalinating water. We have another company called Desalinator. They produce pure water by also using heat, basically waste heat, and that then becomes in a way free water because you use the waste heat to produce it. And by doing all of that, we come to a very efficient ecosystem of producing and transporting the hydrogen. And that's an approach that that resonated with in our conversations with Hydrom. I presented that to the Sultan and the King in Amsterdam, as a result of that, we then progressed it further, and we signed in May at the World Hydrogen Summit in Rotterdam. We signed an MOU with Hydrom to take the project to the next stage, which basically is completing a feasibility study, which we have started now. And then we hope by the end of the year we are quite confident that we will be able to demonstrate the economics, and then basically go to the next stage will be the engineering and then realizing the project. And this week I was in Oman and had the conversations with the different partners to see where we are going to realize the project, and we progressed conversations with the Port of Soar. And there's a good connection with the Netherlands already. Port of Soar is a joint venture with the Port of Rotterdam involved. And that's kind of interesting as well, because we will produce the green hydrogen in Port of Soar, make LOHC, and then ship the LOHC via Port of Rotterdam to the Netherlands and to the rest of Europe. And that is that's an amazing collaboration between Oman and the Netherlands, which if everything goes well, we'll see green hydrogen being shipped as LOHC somewhere in 2028, I hope.
I hope so. You talked about a lot of production methods and a lot of carriers, and when you go to the region with different regulatory framework, it might be difficult to align with all these standards or different standards between each. I mean, if we compare Europe and the Gulf region, they have quite different standards. But I mean, what will be your approach if you, for example, how to align with all these different standards?
Yeah, well, of course, the standards and the approach in the countries that I'm working mostly with in this region, which is Oman at the moment, Oman, the UAE, and Saudi, they all have quite a different approach. How they Saudi very sort of let down from the government. Oman more a collaborative model. UAE works different again, but that same is with Europe. I mean, because we are not alone in Europe either. Of course, you have, although maybe from a regulatory perspective, the EU tries to regulate a lot around green hydrogen with the Renewable Energy Directive and things like that. But on the other hand, there are 27 countries in the EU, and they all looking in their own interest as well, and they all want to sort of develop opportunities themselves. So you're finding the right balance between adapting to different situations and at the same time collaborate where it makes sense, because we all have the same goal that we want to reach net zero by, let's say, 2050 or 2060, and so we need to collaborate. On the other hand, you also need to be realistic that you want to compete as well, because it needs to be, it's a good thing, because that makes things more affordable, because there needs to be a business case, and that is what you basically need to manage in a flexible way.
So when we are scaling for the hydrogen supply chain or the value chain, how important is it for data-driven decision making? The importance of data for, to expand that value chain, and what technology adoption are you seeing coming in the next coming years?
Well, yeah, how can I say? I mean, data, of course, data, AI, and all these new technologies, they are important in every industry, but maybe even more so in this part of the business, because it's new, it's all needs to be newly created, so there's an opportunity to use data. You need to make sure that there's a lot of regulation around being able to demonstrate that the products are low carbon as people say they are, so that it's being measured and that it's being locked in the right way, and that and data, of course, plays an important role there. So I definitely see that as being very important in making sure that everything is done in a reliable and a safe and in a trustworthy way, basically.
Great. And now shifting gears to fuel cells. You mentioned about different technologies or different production methods. You mentioned alkaline, you mentioned PEM. Also, our focus or something really interesting is solid oxide, when you mentioned that, how to use excessive heat. South Korea has begun mass production, and they're having a demo or pilot project for that. What role do you see the fuel cell power, for power generation coming for the data center infrastructure?
Yeah. Well, of course, data centers. I think it's important. I hear different messages, but they say, well, if you do an AI search with ChatGPT, for example, and compare that with the Google search, as we all do, then that uses, a reading between 10 and 30 times as much energy for an AI search, basically, and that means that what we now see, the wave of AI technology coming, that will increase the amount of power of electricity that is required, and data centers, of course, play an important role in that, because that's where all these searches are being processed in all those computers, and that creates heat, and that needs to be cooled down, and it needs power to run the data centers, and it needs power to cool them down, and that is where. And that gives a strain on the grid as well, which is often already overloaded. So with massive data centers, that can become even more of a problem. And then hydrogen can be a solution to decouple data centers from the grid and have them have their own energy supply. Using fuel cells that, like solid oxide fuel cells, for example, that also run on high temperature, or even PEM fuel cells would be the same. Depends on which temperature, how much waste heat you can generate, and that heat you can use again, because the heat that you can then can use at different levels. You can use it to generate electricity through running it through a turbine, let's say, and generate electricity that way. And if you then have a lower grade heat, you can also use that to help cooling down the system. So in that way, you make the energy use more efficient, and you can use hydrogen and hydrogen technology to optimize the use of electricity, let's say.
Saying about optimization, so you mentioned about the supply chain of the hydrogen, and we involve a lot of companies in one main goal, which is some of them work on the production, the others work on the transportation. Which part of the supply chain you're seeing that is promising or can flourish in the future? Is it storage? Is it transportation?
The jury is still out, of course, but you have to also take into account. Not hydrogen is a building block. It's like the base of creating all kind of hydrocarbons eventually as well. Because hydrogen you can use as hydrogen itself and burn it, but you can, as is already being done, of course, where the most of the hydrogen is being used is to make ammonia. Ammonia is then being used as a fertilizer. That is where the most of the current hydrogen is being used, apart also from in the petrochemical industry. But there are other applications, either as pure hydrogen. You can use it to make green steel because hydrogen can be used as an alternative to coke to reduce iron ore to iron. So you take the oxide of oxygen molecules out of the iron ore by letting it react with hydrogen, so that creates water, and then you are left with pure iron, which is what you want. So that's where you can apply hydrogen at scale in the industry. Other industries which need heat, like cement industry or ceramic industry or whatever or glass industry, they all need a lot of heat, and hydrogen, that is difficult to achieve with electricity, but it's more easy to achieve with hydrogen. But you can also make other molecules out of it, because once you have hydrogen, then you can start building up again, and you can create what they call synthetic fuels. That can be methane. We talk about LNG, but LNG you can have from fossil fuels, natural gas, but you can also make it synthetically, and you can start with hydrogen and find a source of carbon that is biogenic, so that it doesn't add to the greenhouse gas, let's say, that comes from fossil fuels derived CO2. And if you then use those carbon molecules to build, starting with methane or methanol or even more complex hydrocarbons, you can build any molecule you want. And that's the beauty with hydrogen, I think, with the hydrogen economy, that it becomes the basis. You can basically you can make from water and solar or wind energy, you can make any product you want. And I think that is, I think that's amazing if you think about it, that we don't need fossil fuels anymore, that we can produce any product that we want that is now being made out of fossil fuels through the petrochemical industry, that we can make that from renewable energy, from wind and solar and water basically, and can then build the molecules that we need to make the world go around.
Perfect. This brings us to the last question. With your vast experience, you have been through a lot. You have seen a lot of companies. You have seen startups. You have seen big companies. Do you have a piece of advice for startup companies who's starting to explore, any part of the renewable or the energy transition pathways? What piece of advice would you give them if they want to start a company?
There is something which they call the valley of death. That is, there's a lot of companies come up with very innovative ideas, and they have a lot of good ideas are being developed. But then they need to grow the company, and then they run out of money basically, and they get to the end of the runway, and they won't survive. Not because they don't have a good idea, but because they don't have the funding to develop the technology, and cannot bring it to success basically. And that's a shame, of course, because I see a lot of good companies, and then I see also companies that are much larger, but not necessarily better in the idea that they have, but they have been smarter in getting access to the funds to develop their technology. And often a lot, because it's all new and it's not immediately profitable, a lot of those companies, they struggle, let's say, and if they are dependent on hydrogen, and the hydrogen kind of developments go slower than expected, then people pull away from it and the investment isn't there. So you need to create the right environment that those startups can grow, and they need support from governments, from wealth funds, from whatever is available. But the companies, I would advise to the companies is that they need to start early enough with looking after their funding and doing their marketing and getting support for that. Often companies they are so deep down in the technology, and they're focusing on developing the technology, and they forget about running the business that requires other skills. And I think it's important that they start early enough with promoting their ideas and getting to the platform. And that's what we help with, because we have quite a few very innovative companies in Holland, and we get them over to Oman, for example. We have the Green Hydrogen Summit in December coming up, and we have number of these new ideas that we try to bring to the table there and let them speak and talk about their ideas. And then we have instruments like Future Fund Oman. They create what is called the Energy Transition Fund, which is meant to help startup companies like this. And that is all something that we can collectively try to filter out the companies with the right ideas and try to help them to get to the next stage of growth.
Now, before I ask what the question, I mean, for the strategic partnership, you mean like what you have done before, or what you are doing at the moment, or the number of years, or the number of companies that you're getting in?
What I'm trying to do is develop strategic partnerships. I explained that in my career, I was a big part of my role was developing strategic partnerships when I worked for BP and worked in a department that was called strategic accounts. Mm-hmm. And we developed those global partnerships, like with Ford Motor Company, the one that I was working on. And they were very successful because we generated hundreds of millions of dollars in value by doing that, basically. And what is important is to understand, the word says it already, strategic partnership means that you want to think strategically. And that means the relationship needs to become strategic rather than transactional. And a lot of and particularly when we talk about, let's say when we talk about hydrogen, we talk about, we can't find the off-takers, or the off-takers say, the product is not cheap enough. Mm-hmm. And everyone is focused on the price, basically, because they see it as a transaction, and they use the hydrogen for purposes where where it's a commodity, basically, and where the price of the commodity is important. So a very transactional relationship, basically. And if you want to develop partnerships and they need to be strategic, then the relationship needs to be strategic. And what does that mean? That you need to look wider than just the transaction. You need to understand what are you trying to create, what are you trying to achieve, and how are you going to do that? What is the road towards that? And you need to it's important that it's being supported in the whole organization, and that when we were developing this strategic alliance with Ford Motor Company, then we had the support of the very senior level of the organization. The CEO of Ford was directly involved with developing the partnership. Mm-hmm. And that's important, that it works all the way from the top down, that you have the broad support. And that's what I like by countries like here in Oman, that is when we met with the Sultan as well, of course, that he knows about hydrogen, and he knows because he's driving it, and and it's all sort of top down. It cascades to all the departments, the ministry, the private sector companies. They're all kind of working towards the same goal in a way, and that is what you need to achieve. And that's by bringing together all those companies that you want all to work towards the same goal, and define what are the hooks, what are the different sub-projects that you try to develop, and how do they all fit back into a strategic goal, basically. And I think that's important to keep in mind.
I mean, what do you think the key success factors that would you consider in forming a strategic partnership? I mean, you mentioned that the cost is one of the factors that can withdraw some of these negotiations or some of these partnerships. But what are the key of making really a success strategic partnership?
Well, it needs to be a win-win, of course, in a strategic partnership. So both sides, both partners, or all partners involved, they need to get value out of that, to be committed to it, to bring it forward. You need to be able to look long term. You cannot, particularly let's say with the area that we're working in, hydrogen, there is no short term gain. So you need to be in there for the long term, basically. You need to kind of look beyond the transaction, as I already mentioned. For example, if I look at the project that we're trying to develop in Oman, mm-hmm. It's a demonstration project, so that's not the end goal. It's a 10 megawatt installation in the end that produces a limited amount of hydrogen, but we hope to be able to demonstrate a lot of the technology, that it works, and that it works when it is connected to each other, and that also it works in the downstream further as well. And once it works, we want to scale it up. That is the goal. When we can prove that the solid oxide electrolyzers with Bosal and Solidera are working, we want it to be used as a solution for the gigawatt projects in Oman. And then more electrolyzers are needed. Bosal's, let's say, strategic goal is to build an electrolyzer plant in Oman where they can produce a gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity per year. And if that commitment is there and they want to create that value in the country, then you expect also the country to support them in making this project a reality. So you have to look beyond the short-term goals and look at what the long-term opportunity is.
So when you mentioned local manufacturing, that means big in-country value.
Absolutely, yeah.
For the country, and which means it's not necessarily only that factory will be built in, which means a lot of third parties or local partners who can rise up and look at what are the services that can they provide for that industry. Do you have any examples for that? I mean, not in the GCC, even globally, where like a factory or a plant started up and that brings up all these like I would say related services.
Yeah, I mean that is it happens at different scales, of course. If you look where a lot of development at the moment is happening is in the north of the Netherlands, in Groningen. That's the province in the north where there's more space basically available, and that's where a lot of the hydrogen oases, what they call them, hydrogen valleys, I think in the Netherlands, are being created. And you see that this starts to create a whole new ecosystem, and that creates jobs, that creates infrastructure, that creates opportunities and work in all different kind of areas, which I think is a good way to see how a new industry is creating work and opportunities.
When you mentioned about the value chain in Groningen and things that we are learning from, during my master's degree, I did my research on underground hydrogen storage, and one of the places that I looked for was how do they store underground gas in Groningen.
Yeah.
So this is an example of when countries lead on new technologies. Yeah. The others, I mean, can mimic that and even develop it further. This is an example for. I mean, how do you see that? I mean, when you say the hydrogen valleys in Netherlands, can we set up something similar here in Oman?
Yeah, I think. I mean, that is sort of that. But Netherlands is a front runner in hydrogen, let's say, because they want to be a front runner in energy transition, and a lot of expertise is already there, also from the oil and gas sector in the ports. The port of Rotterdam, of course, was the largest oil and gas port in Europe, but is now becoming what seems to be the largest hub for clean energy as well, because the knowledge is already there and that can be used, and that's also being brought across to here. We work with GasUnie. GasUnie is the Netherlands infrastructure company that develops pipelines and used to do that for natural gas, but is now commissioned to develop the hydrogen pipeline network in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. But they also started working in Oman with the OQ gas networks, because they have a lot of knowledge that they built now from the early days in building the pipeline in the Netherlands, which they then can help companies like OQ gas networks to develop the same in Oman. So that is where we collaborate and where we see opportunities to work together. Same thing on the storage side. We have storage companies, a lot of expertise. The Netherlands has always been a trading country. That is why Rotterdam is, of course, so strategically positioned as a harbor and the biggest oil and gas harbor, but that brings with it a lot of storage companies, and we have in our partnerships companies like VTTI, Advario, Vopak, and they all play a role here in Oman and in the Middle East as well. And they build terminals for green energy in Rotterdam, import terminals, but at the same time, they can play a big role in building export terminals in this part of the world and to make them connected. So to create that kind of infrastructure, to have to take the learnings from one side and bring them across to the other side, I think that's working well, and that's where we, with Holland Hydrogen Hub, try to contribute to recognize where the opportunities are and to bring the right parties into the frame, basically.
I think you need more than one episode for that, right?
Yes.
Because you have a lot of stories and many companies, and each one have its own unique.
There is amazing. There is so amazing. What I find interesting about the whole energy transition and the hydrogen space is that there is so many innovation happening now of companies that come with great ideas how they can develop new technologies. They're not even a partner yet, but they want to become a partner. Number 55, I guess. They do iron, and you think iron? What has that to do with energy transition? They burn iron as an heat source. The iron is when you burn iron, you get iron oxide, which is basically rust. The rust is being shipped back to Oman, and can be then with hydrogen. You can deoxidize. How do you call that? You get the oxygen out again. So like you do with iron ore and make iron of it with DRI. So you use the hydrogen to turn rust back into iron. The iron gets shipped back to where the heat is needed, and then you burn the iron, and then you bring the rust back again, and then you create a cycle where you can transport iron powder or rust effectively, which is much easier to transport than hydrogen, because you don't need new vessels like hydrogen carriers, but you can use bulk carriers basically to do that, the same as you would use for shipping iron ore around. And that's interesting that you see those kind of new ideas coming up that work and that can all contribute to achieving the goals, which in the end is getting to save the planet from global warming and avoid the carbon dioxide emissions coming from fossil fuels.
Marcel, thanks for your time and thanks for joining us. That's a lot of experience, and we have learned a lot from this episode. I hope that we can meet again. And I'm pretty sure you'll come on to Oman next time, right?
Absolutely.
You'll be here for the summit?
Well, we have a project going on here, so we need to be probably now on a monthly basis to make sure that we are delivering and not just talk about hydrogen, but start doing it as well.
This is what we're looking forward, and appreciate your time here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.